to the Christian Perspectives 2004 YouTube channel. And in this video today, it is Who is Jesus of Nazareth? In this video, we will be going through a slide presentation that I made, going through what the big four worldviews believe about Jesus, and ultimately which one is right. Because the very, value of human life, the very, question of our existence in this world fringes on who is Jesus of Nazareth. And in this video, we will also be presenting historical evidence, and so this isn't just like a biased kind of video. This actually will feature a lot of history, which I think is good. That's what we need. But with that being said, let's dive into the overview. A quick overview of Jesus, basically something that everyone will agree, at least the first part anyway, which is Jesus was born within the first year of the first century and would go on to revolutionize the world in a way no one else has before or since. From his amazing ethical teachings to the claim of being God himself and the stories of his resurrection, every person walking the face of this planet, regardless what they believe, must ask and answer the question, who is Jesus of Nazareth? The very meaning of life itself depends on the true identity of Jesus of Nazareth. So, everyone agrees that Jesus was a great ethical teacher. Everyone agrees that he revolutionized the world. And he was born in the first century, or at least most people agree with that. Of course, other parts within there, not everyone agrees on, but we'll get into that. The Christian view of Jesus. The Christian view of Jesus is easily the most well-known. Key beliefs about Jesus and Christianity are as follows: being God in human form, born of a virgin and performed miracles, crucified, died, and resurrected on the third day. He is the fulfillment of the messianic prophecies from the Torah. Some good examples are Isaiah 53, Micah chapter 5 verse 2, and Psalm 22, and believes he is returning again to bring judgment upon the earth. Now let's make a quick note here. When I mentioned born of a virgin and perform miracles under the power of God, because he is God himself. So perform miracles under his own will. So keep that in mind, because keeping that in mind of Jesus performing miracles under his own will is very, very important to know for when we get to the next slide. The Islamic view of Jesus. Lesser known views of Jesus, like his presence within Islam, where he is known as Isa or Isos. The following is what Muhammad and Muslims view of Jesus: a good prophet and teacher, born of a virgin, performed miracles, but not. See, this is where I mentioned, make that mental note of where the Christian view views Jesus as being God in human form and performing miracles under his own will. In Islam, Jesus is just a good prophet and a teacher, and he did perform miracles, but not of his own will, but by the will of Allah. And Islam rejects his claim to be God of ever happening, and rejects the crucifixion and resurrection. And you see the Quran verses. Quran chapter 4, 150, verse 157, and Quran chapter 4, verse 171. And Muslims believe Jesus will return before Judgment Day as a messenger of Allah, but not to bring judgment like Christianity. So while there is some overlap in the Islamic and Christian view of Jesus, like him being sinless, being born of a virgin, and performing miracles, and him returning again, there are some extreme differences. Islam rejects the crucifixion, it rejects the resurrection, it rejects Jesus being God in human form, it rejects Jesus performing miracles of his own will, and it pretty much rejects the whole idea of the messianic prophecies as well. So Islam just views Jesus as a good prophet and good teacher. And also, when it comes to Judgment Day, Muslims view Jesus as a messenger of Allah, similar to how we Christians view John the Baptist as being the one out in the wilderness proclaiming the coming of the Christ before Jesus came. That's my understanding, more or less, of what the Islamic view of Jesus' return is, that he will not bring judgment like Christians believe, but rather he will just be a messenger of Allah. Now, the Judaistic view of Jesus. Judaism views of Jesus can vary by here, but here are the most consistent beliefs about Jesus in Judaism. Not the Messiah or a good prophet, if even one at all. Do not believe that he fulfilled the messianic prophecies, like their expectations being a great war general, political figure, and ruling Israel on a literal throne. So that's why they don't believe Jesus to be the Messiah. And they reject any and all beliefs of resurrection and miracles. And some Judaistic people believe that his body was stolen by his followers, and that's something that even the prophet John captures in the book of John, of what the Jewish authorities claimed to have happened after the resurrection. So that's where that comes from. Now, the atheistic view of Jesus. This was actually very interesting. Atheists really talking about Jesus a lot. If they talk about any religious figure, they often talk about the Buddha rather than Jesus, and I think that has to do with the Buddha not really being a divine being. Not even Buddhists really believe him to be a divine being. So this was very interesting to learn about, because in my experience, most atheists don't really talk about Jesus. They just reject God, but they never talk really anything about Jesus. So this was very, very interesting to learn about. So similar to Judaism, atheistic views of Jesus vary, with some believing him to be a myth despite historical evidence saying otherwise. However, most do believe that Jesus was a real person, like Bart Ehrman, sorry if I pronounce his name wrong, for example. And the following are the typical atheistic view of Jesus. Now just know, atheist, kind of like how within Judaism, Judaistic person, their view of Jesus is going to vary a lot, I would say. So this is, though, I think what most would agree on. A moral teacher So in a similar light to Socrates, rejects miracles and resurrection and any form of divinity, and they respect his teachings of love, forgiveness, and peace, but believe him to be no more than a Jewish philosopher. So basically, the atheistic view of Jesus looks at him in a similar light to the likes of the Buddha, to the likes of Socrates, to the likes of Aristotle and Plato, a philosopher. They don't believe that there's anything divine about Jesus. They don't believe Jesus to be God in human form. Basically, they just believe Jesus to be a good teacher, a good philosopher, and that's it. They don't believe no more about him. They just believe him to be a footnote in human history. That is what the atheistic view of Jesus is. Now, notice, though, how most views of Jesus are positive. Now, some of the Judaistic views of Jesus are not positive, but I've done plenty of research that there are some extremely positive views of Jesus in Judaism, especially those that do actually believe him to be a Judaistic prophet. So, clearly most people, whether Christian, Muslim, atheist, Judaism, even Buddhist, everyone believes something about Jesus, and everyone tends to agree with Jesus' teachings. So, who is right? Does the atheist get it right? Do the Christians get it right? Do the Muslims get it right? Do the Judaistic beliefs get it right? Who gets it right? Well, this is where history comes in. This is where unbiased history and true, accurate history comes into play, which can, unfortunately, nowadays can be very hard to find with all the fabrications that are shared. The historically accurate Jesus. Now, actually, the point that I was about to make, I'll make after I read this. There is much first century evidence of the Christian Jesus being true, including from non-Christian sources that have shattered the fallacy of the Gospels being written centuries after the fact. Below is some evidence. Tacitus, Josephus, Pliny mention Jesus and Christians in first century writings. None of them were Christian. The devotion and ultimate execution of Jesus' followers by Rome for rejecting Caesar as Lord, an empty tomb, along with hundreds of eyewitness testimonies of the resurrected Jesus, both within and outside of the four Gospels, like a writing from 93 AD, and logic and rationality backs up the resurrection, as the followers of Jesus would never have died if they did not see him, as they too initially rejected his resurrection as recorded in the Gospel of John. And what I wanted to mention here is that never once can you look at the historical Jesus and separate him from Christianity. You can't do that. That's impossible. You cannot separate Jesus from God, which clearly disproves the whole train of thought of the atheistic view of Jesus. And then when you look at the history around the Gospels, when you look at the fact that Jesus was crucified on the cross and he did rise from the dead, and the apostles called him Lord and even died calling him Lord instead of Caesar clearly shatters the Islamic view of Jesus and the Judaistic view of Jesus, and clearly the Christian view of Jesus is the historically accurate Jesus, because every time you look at the Jesus of history, he ties perfectly with the Christian view of Jesus. It's like you have an apple tree and it's gonna grow apples. So when you look at the historical Jesus, Christianity's gonna grow from that apple, from that tree, because Jesus and Christianity go hand in hand, because the Christian view of Jesus is the historically accurate Jesus. So it's time for you, the viewer. What do you believe? Who do you believe Jesus of Nazareth to be? So, who do you believe him to be? Because now it's time